Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Lightspeed webinar series. My name is Stephanie. I'll be around for the whole webinar here if you guys have any questions. We do expect that this webinar is going to take about 40 to 45 minutes, and we'll still pause every now and then to take your questions as they come in if you have some. If you'd like to ask our presenters anything during the presentation, just go to the questions box to the right-hand side of your screen and click on that button to type. Our hosts today are Roland, Cuellar and Leila Rao, presenting on a portion of a business agility topic, specifically around impact mapping. So remember to submit those questions as we go along, and we'll also have a live Q&A when we close. And I believe we're ready to kick off. So over to you guys.
Hello, this is Leila Rao, and I'm the president of Agile Extended, and I do consulting at the enterprise level, which basically means taking Agile best practices and combining them with design thinking and lean and making it sustainable transformations for our clients.
Very good, thanks Leila. This is Roland Cuellar. I'm Vice President of Digital Transformation at Lightspeed. We typically work with larger organizations to help them move over to end-to-end Agile delivery, trying to work upstream with the business and then within IT and towards production to have that entire value stream delivering in an Agile fashion. And today we want to talk a little bit about some of the upstream portions of that, the business agility side of this, and get into an important topic and a powerful tool called impact mapping. So I'm going to turn it over to Leila, and she's going to walk us through some of the foundational information around that, and then I'm going to join back in a few slides later and give a real-world example from a Fortune 500 firm we worked with recently.
Okay, so this whole business agility thing comes down to the fact that we in Agile talk about delivering business value, but it's pretty hard to define what business value is since it's so contextual. Every client, every industry, and every challenge represents a different definition of business value. So we can't get it from a textbook, but we still have to know what is business agility for our client in a given context so that we can define what value is, communicate that value, and then provide some techniques to help measure value, because of course, that's how we know that we're delivering value. So impact mapping is a very powerful tool to have that discussion on what is value and how do we define and measure it. So impact mapping is a visualization. And why do we do visualization? If you're Agile, you know this, because this is how people remember and retain information. It helps people come to the same understanding of what the problem and what potential solutions would look like in their context, so that we can identify dependencies, any problems, recognize patterns that will help us make better decisions. So the goal of impact mapping is we all agree on what value is in this context, and we know how we're going to pursue that value and validate that we're achieving value or not. So the next slide really talks about what makes for an effective visualization. And so visualization is anything that conveys information and a story with a goal in a visual format. Pretty straightforward. So let's talk about specifically impact mapping. As we said earlier, it is a technique that can help deliver alignment between strategic business level stakeholders as well as the team level actions that hopefully support the strategic definition. It is a collaborative technique done by senior technical and business people. It's a mind map, collaborative mind map. It should capture the scope of what is business value and what are the assumptions that are underlying that definition of business value. And it does very explicitly identify the why, who, how, and what. So again, coming to a shared understanding very explicitly, so that we all know what we're doing and why. So the image shows what the visualization form of an impact map. It has 4 entities to it: the goal, the actor. These are all of the individuals and entities, group, department, organization that can help hinder or help us to achieve the goal. The impact is how the actor can help or hinder the goal, and the deliverable is what we can do to generate the impact and get the goal. So this is the formal structure of an impact map, and we're going to use this structure to make sure that we're not missing any steps and that we've fully captured all the details we need to execute it well. So this example of an impact map is from a book called Impact Mapping for Software Delivery, and it talks about if your goal is to grow mobile advertising, think about who are your actors. For example, super fans with mobile devices would be an example of an actor. Another actor would be concert organizers, as well as artist agents and promoters. So the idea with an actor is you want to cast a wide net of everybody who can help you or hurt you from reaching this goal. And in this example, we elaborate on the super fans with mobile devices actor and think about what are the impacts that we could want from them. Do we want them to come back more frequently, perhaps stay longer, view more ads? These are all brainstorming techniques to give us alternatives. And then again, for each impact, we think about what we can do to help make that impact happen. So if we want a super fan to come back more frequently, do we push updates more often to mobile devices? Do we give them special offers? So all of this is very much about expanding the field of options that we have to solve the problem of growing mobile advertising. Any questions about this? Stephanie, do we have any questions? Anyone not clear on what impact mapping is?
Nope.
All right, I'm going to take those you're going and go ahead and toss out the first poll question, Stephanie. Okay, so there are a couple of really critical roles that impact mapping can play. Obviously, we talk about strategic planning. So often what we do at the team level, it's a different point of view than what our senior stakeholders have. And impact mapping is a way of bridging that gap so that what we're doing at the team level is in alignment to the organization mission and goals. The other part, as we discussed, is defining quality. What is it that we're working towards? What does good mean in this context? How do we get better? And how do we know that we're getting better? And the last role here is scope management. So sometimes, if you're trying to solve big business problems or challenges, you have to put some boundaries on what you can achieve, because we want to pick actions that we can do so that we can measure their effectiveness. So strategic planning, defining quality, and scope management are the three key roles of impact mapping. And what hopefully it does if we do this well is we capture the assumptions that we're making, we are prioritizing holistically, and we are doing work based on a plan, not just what is the biggest emergency right now. So a couple of different ways in which Roland and I both have used impact mapping. Innovation workshop for new products and new services, or if you want to create a new portfolio and combine multiple products, impact mapping works for that. And since right now I work in government, since I'm here in DC, so a big part of my work is legacy enterprise projects. How do we re-platform cold fusion projects for the current millennium? So that's a big part of impact mapping purpose. Defining testing strategies. How do we test these big applications? What's the biggest risk? How do we give ourselves the most value from testing? And any other effort you can think about. Honestly, impact mapping is a very flexible tool. The more you understand it, the more ways you can find to apply it.
All right, and here are the results from that first poll.
Okay. Sorry, Stephanie, how do I see the results of the poll?
I'll share that with you.
Okay, thank you.
So the question was, do you feel your work is valued within your organization and helps meet organization goals? 48% of you said yes, 0% said no, which is good, and 52% said sometimes.
Okay, that's really, really encouraging. So some of you must work for some pretty incredible places. I'm really glad to hear that. If you are clear that your work is valued, then rock on and use impact mapping where you need to get clarification. For those who say sometimes, try applying impact mapping in those situations and see if we can come to more clarity and a better shared understanding. Okay, so the one thing I will talk about is we talked about impact mapping coming up with all these options. This is not a to-do list, okay? All of these options mean, oh my God, we have so much work to do. That is not the point of an impact map. That is what distinguishes it apart from a backlog. A backlog is a list of work to be done. Impact map provides us with a list of options that could be done. And we collectively choose one option to pursue so that we can validate if that one action is meeting our business goal or not. So, coming up with an impact map, it's some work, but don't feel overwhelmed by all of the action items that can come out of it. So these are very much prioritize and pursue one action item at a time, or a few. If you're talking about a big organization, you have multiple actors. It is possible that each actor can have a different action item, but generally speaking, these are options, not to-do things. Okay. The one thing you want to make sure if you're working in Agile is impact mapping is part of your regular Agile process. This is not something that should be completely outside. So you're doing your impact mapping with your senior stakeholders. The deliverables often become epic level items for team level. So you take a deliverable from impact mapping, convert that to an epic, and then deconstruct into user stories and tasks for your team to deliver over the course of 2 or 3 sprints, or maybe even a release. So impact mapping ties directly into story mapping, which goes into team level deliverables, which hopefully is turning into working software that reaches customer, and we can measure and trace value right back to our impact map. Any questions so far? That was a lot of information. Sorry, Stephanie?
Sure, we've got one. Could you give 1 or 2 scenarios that would trigger the need to revisit and adjust the impact mapping?
Sure. So a real life example, I was helping a client use impact mapping to decide, they had to hire some new people and trying to figure out what skill set they want to bring in anticipation of where technology was going, right? So we said, okay, we're going to go to MicroStrategy. And so let's start looking for people who have MicroStrategy experience. And then 3 months later, from higher down up the food chain, we said, oh, MicroStrategy has been put on hold because it's too expensive. We're going to continue to use ServiceNow and just take advantage of their analytics. So all of a sudden, we had to come back and say, okay, we're deprioritizing MicroStrategy skills, but we are reprioritizing ServiceNow, and let's think about which projects are going to be impacted and how. So any kind of adjustments often happen 2 ways. One, with decisions made by somebody external that impact our ability to deliver on our commitments. The other alternative is, using the same example, if that reset didn't happen and we looked for MicroStrategy employees, we couldn't find any. So does that mean that we stay with MicroStrategy, or do we say, we're not finding people with this skill set in our price range, maybe we should look at a different tool that does have people that we can afford to bring in? Those are 2 examples within the same scenario of how you would adapt your first assumptions. Okay, so speaking of examples, Roland's going to talk us through a real life example of what he did with impact mapping.
Great, thanks a lot, Leila. Really appreciate the introduction. So I wanted to give a real example now. This is from a large Fortune 500 company that we worked with recently. It's a financial services firm. And we'll walk through this in just a moment. So here's one of the things we're trying to do with this, and it's trying to hone in on what the goals are that we're trying to achieve and what's the least amount of work we can actually do to achieve them. So there's a little bit of fascinating information, I think, coming out of some leaders from Amazon and Microsoft. And so if you look at the green box there, according to some of these folks, only about a third of the ideas that we implement actually create the statistically significant positive change we're trying to get: grow revenue, reduce cost, increase website traffic, or improve transactions, or whatever it is. And a third produce no difference whatsoever, and one third actually make things worse. So 2/3 of our ideas are either ineffective or actually detrimental. And so it's really something to keep in mind as we're trying to figure out what we're going to do with our products or our projects. That there's a potentially a lot of stuff in there that we may be doing or being asked to do that aren't going to actually deliver the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. So, for example, here's a little bit of a little scenario for you. Let's say that you are working on a project, good sized project, and it has a lot of new features and other changes. Let's say there's 100 new features and other changes in there. You implement this project, it takes a little while for you to do that. And afterwards, you're able to measure that this product that you've been supporting and enhancing, that the usage of that product is up in some fashion. The question is this project successful? And in most organizations, we would say, yeah, we wanted to improve the usage of this product. We implemented all this stuff, and the usage is up. Therefore, the project is successful. And if you sort of keep it at that level, one could make that case. But if you dig a little deeper and we take the information from the last slide, we might discern that, given that 2/3 of the changes fail to produce business outcome, and only 1/3 of them actually got us, the outcomes we were achieving, is it possible that we could have gotten the same bump up in the usage of this product by only delivering 1/3 of the features? You'd have to deliver the right third, obviously, and that's a problem in and of itself. But would we have gotten the same product usage bump ups by only delivering 1/3 of the features and only spending 1/3 of the money and getting it done 2/3 faster? Right, so that's the question I think that's on the table. Can we get the same outcome with less work and less time and less money? And so the goal and the role here at the bottom is how can we be more discreet about what we're building? Can we quickly define, build, and test and launch a feature, an MMP, an MVP, a capability, etc., put that into production and measure the outcome of that? And are we getting the impact that we had hoped to or not? And it's possible that one may reach your business goals faster that way and also spend less money doing it. So here's the example from the Fortune 500 company. This company we were working with was having some problems in the market around the perceptions of their mobile app. The mobile app was kind of viewed as sort of mid-pack compared to their competitors. And the market research from folks like Gartner and Forrester and those kind of folks said that there were some potential issues with the product in terms of why it was ranking mid-pack. And so we'll go through some of these issues. But the results are that we're not getting as many downloads on the app as we'd like, lower usage than we'd like, maybe some lost sales potentially, and so it's just brand perception issues. And those kind of brand perception issues can go pretty high up in the company in terms of people being concerned about them. Well, so what are some of the actors and impacts in the mobile space? Well, maybe I'm using the mobile app to do searching of some kind, and so some of my actors are people searching for stuff, goods or services, products, etc. And from an impact standpoint, I'd like the searcher to be able to purchase more because they can find stuff that is relevant to them, more quickly. Maybe I've got other actors. It could be the same actor who's changing role over time, buyers. And maybe I can improve buying purchasing rates because buyers have easy and flexible mobile purchasing options. Maybe I've got multiple ways to pay on my mobile device. Sometimes they enter credit card information and all that kind of stuff is tedious on a mobile phone. Is there some way that we can just have it be a one-click kind of a thing, for example? And so these are some of the things that they were sort of struggling with as ways to improve the usage and perception of the product. So we can start to put together a little impact map around this. And sorry for the small text, but real life doesn't always fit into the little boxes, unfortunately. But over on the why, we want to improve, on the far left, we want to improve our mobile app ranking. I've got some influencers here, the who's, and those are, like my searchers and my mobile buyers. And I'm going to hone in on the mobile buyers for a moment in the middle. We want them to buy and improve their buying rates because they have very easy, fast, flexible payment options. We think that's an impact that they will buy more stuff if they have these flexible payment options. And so one of the problems we're going to try to do is make purchasing on the mobile app a lot easier. So let's implement, let's say, Apple Pay or Apple Wallet on the iOS devices and Android Pay on the Android devices, and so on and so forth. Now, in a typical large organization that tries to projectize everything, the way this would typically happen is, well, we would gather up all the changes that we want to make to the mobile app, put together a business case, come up with all the high-level requirements, put together estimates around that, go get funded for the coming year. At the end of the year, we actually get money to do all this stuff. We would launch this as a big project, and 6 months later, we'd actually implement hundreds of changes or dozens of changes to the mobile app. And back to my example before, yeah, maybe the usage of the app would go up, but we have done a third of the work and a third of the time and a third of the money and also gotten a bump up in the usage. So what this company decided to do is, instead of projectizing all of this, let's just do one thing, do it very quickly, and measure the results. So they decided to implement Apple Pay. Let's just get the Apple Pay part working. We're going to do that immediately right now. So they do that. And then what normally would take months to do with approvals and sign-offs and budgets, they just launch in and deliver the Apple Pay functionality, and they do that in a matter of weeks. And soon we're starting to get real data on the usage of the application, actual revenue dollars and usage dollars and usage rates and all that kind of stuff, and we can measure that over time. And so now we're starting to bump up the perception and usage of the product. We're starting to address some of the problems that market research has uncovered. And we've done that immediately and a lot less time and a lot less money being spent. And so that's just an example sometimes of how the projectization of everything and the batching up of work into large projects can kind of maybe lead you to do too much work and reduce your ability to discern what it is that's really important to customers and what is not. So that's this example. Now, one of the issues that we have with all of this, of course, is and Stephanie, if you will go ahead and launch the next polling question. We'll talk about it at the end. I'll just go ahead and go through the slides, and at the end we'll go ahead and discuss the results of that. But I'll go ahead and keep going. When you have all of these options on the table through impact mapping, over on the far right-hand side with all of your potential actions you might take, there might be 10 or 20 or 30 or more. How do you know which thing to launch? We're asking you to be more discreet about what you launch and how to measure the impact of that. But how do you know which thing to pick? So one of the things you can do is to minimize the cost of delay. Those of you who may have studied or have heard of the scaled agile process, they would recommend reducing cost of delay. And all of this work comes from the work of Don Reinertson, whose books are fantastic. I would highly encourage you to read them. But he talks really about a methodology called weighted shortest job first as a way to choose which features to launch in the absence of hard economic data. So it's very difficult sometimes to estimate how long it's going to take to do any of these particular actions or features or MVPs. And we also don't know what the financial outcome is going to be in terms of hard dollars and cents. So I don't know how long it's going to take. Sometimes we're bad at estimation. I don't know how much it's going to cost exactly. I don't know what the impact is going to be from a revenue standpoint exactly. So how do you make rational economic decisions in the absence of any of this economic data? Well, what you can do is just use point estimation like we might do in Agile estimation. Those are folks who are familiar with Agile may know that oftentimes we estimate the size of our user stories and other work to do in story points. And all we're doing in that model is just saying this user story or this requirement is 3 times bigger than this other one, right? We can use that same idea to choose which features to implement. So the way you do this is you put your features in a table, like at the bottom here. I've got feature 1, 2, and 3. Now, what we want to do is go through this scenario where we rank all these features against each other. First, for user business value, it says UBV there. And we don't really know what the revenue or upside is going to be, but we might be able to guess that, you know, feature number 1, or let's say feature number 2 is a 1 pointer. It's kind of low business value, we believe. Feature number 1 is 5 points of user value, and feature number 3 that's a whopper. That's, you know, it's 10 times as much value as number 2. I don't know the dollars, but I think that feature 3 is highly valuable. Okay. Then we go through and rank the features against each other in terms of time criticality, and that's what TC stands for, time criticality. There are things that may need to get done by a certain date. You know, tax season, payroll, some of these things have to happen by certain dates. Maybe there's a trade show coming up. And we would say, well, you know, which of these features has the highest time criticality and which others are really at our discretion as to when we want to do them. So we'd rank them that way. Then we'd go through them all in the third column in terms of risk reduction or opportunity enablement. If we were to do this feature, it would be a huge risk reduction for us. It would take a lot of risk off the table, or it would open up all of these opportunities that we didn't have before. And so we would just rank them that way. So feature 1 is low. It's only got 1 point in terms of risk reduction, but feature number 3 is 4 times as much. There's a lot of risk reduction or opportunity enablement for us there. So anyway, we'd go through this process. And now I've got the elements that I need, most of them, to calculate the cost of delay. And the cost of delay is just the sum of the user business value plus the time criticality plus the risk reduction. So feature number 1 gets 11 points in terms of its cost of delay. Feature number 2 only gets 3 points, and feature number 3 is 15 points in terms of cost of delay. So it actually has the highest cost of delay. But there's one more bit of information that we need, and that's the job size or the duration. How long is it going to take us to get this work done? Once again, we don't know necessarily, because we're so bad at estimation, how long it will take to get each of these features done, but I can once again use my point estimation scheme. Feature number 1 is pretty small. We can get that done quickly. It's only a 1 pointer. Feature number 3 is 5 points in size. It's quite a bit bigger. And now, if you divide the cost of delay by the job size, I get the weighted shortest job first. It's basically a measure of bang for the buck. The winner in this case is feature number 1. It gets 11 points in terms of weighted shortest job first score. Notice that it's not the highest user business value. It's actually in the middle. The highest user business value was feature number 3. It had 10 points. But because it's so much larger to do, we're going to be delayed in getting economic benefit back to the organization if we implement that one first. So this methodology would say do feature number 1 first. I can get a fair bit of upside very quickly. Then you would do feature number 3, and you do feature number 2 last. I don't want to go into much more detail about it. There's a lot of information available on this topic of the weighted shortest job first and the cost of delay. But I just wanted to introduce you to a method you might use to make rationally economic decisions about what features to implement when you don't have hard economic data. So that's the example. And I hope that was useful to you. If there are any questions, we can go ahead and take those now. And perhaps I'll turn it back over to Stephanie.
Hi, folks. Yeah. So we do have a couple of questions here, and I will go ahead and start off with a couple that kind of came in at the same time. Roland, you had suggested a certain book. Could you let us know what the title of that was? And is there a list of references that you would suggest people look into?
Okay. Any of the books by Donald Reinertsen, Reinertsen, I believe. He's got a book on product flow. I'll look up the exact title of the book. He has a couple of books out, and they're all excellent. And then the other place to look right now, the folks who have done a good job of documenting this, where they didn't invent it, but they've documented it well, and that's the folks at the Scaled Agile Academy. So if you look up Safe and Scaled Agile Framework, and once you get to their website, look up Weighted Shortest Job First, you'll find out a lot more information about that.
All right, great. So the next question here, do I turn my feature into an impact map, or does an impact map determine my features?
Yes to both. So impact mapping is very flexible, which is awesome and also frustrating because it doesn't tell you how to do it. So I've done both. You can use impact map to deconstruct a feature, but really the higher value is going to be, how do you prioritize your features to achieve a business goal? That's what impact mapping does well. To break down your feature, user story mapping is a really good way to do it. And Jeff Patton wrote the book on user story mapping, literally. It's a fantastic reference. That allows you to think about what are all of the things that need to happen to deliver this feature. What impact map does is more at, how are we defining this functionality? What does it mean to the user? You know, when we create software, user is going to be doing something with that software. How do we ensure that our features, as we define them in software development, actually map back to user or business functionality? That is where impact mapping is going to be more powerful. Does that answer the question?
I believe so. Thanks, Leila. Our next question here is,
I've got that book title now from Don Reinertsen. The title of the book is Principles of Product Development Flow. Principles of Product Development Flow.
Awesome. Thank you, Roland. So our next question here, would you use a preliminary impact mapping to help a business case, for example, to persuade the C-suite to sponsor a project?
Yes, absolutely. That is one of the most powerful cases to use impact maps. The only thing I would suggest, and if you're doing that, make sure the right people are in the room for impact mapping. When you want to get the buy-in from some C-suite individuals, it helps to have them in the rooms so they're hearing the discussion and they're part of building your impact map. That is the most powerful way I found to get senior leadership to buy in on exploring alternatives. And once an alternative is chosen, having them involved in the process ensures that everybody else will follow along and follow through on that one option, and you can see the results and measure it.
All right, fantastic. Next question here. Would it be beneficial to have multiple teams do an impact map on the same topic?
Generally, no. It's something I've never done. If all of your teams, these teams are working towards a similar goal, then have them together and implement the impact map together. Why would you have them do 4 separate maps? Because impact mapping is meant to be done collaboratively. You want people to listen to each other. When we come in to do something like an impact map, we come with our own assumptions, what we know, what we think we know. And the collaborative part of impact mapping ensures that we're challenging our own assumptions, that we're taking into account what somebody else knows that we might not know. That is what makes for a powerful impact map. So if you have teams in sort of portfolio structure working on a single application or towards a single business goal, bring them all together. Draw out the map together. Allow them to talk to each other. And again, that way you have everyone's buy-in and you're also reflecting everybody's point of view. So often in Agile, especially with teams, we talk about we want all the voices. We want everybody's point of view because that enables us to be more accurate, to catch assumptions and stuff. And that would definitely apply to impact mapping.
Thanks for that answer, Leila. The next question I've got here is, what has been your most successful implementation of impact mapping?
I think the one that I just showed a moment ago from the Fortune 500, more like Fortune 100 financial services firm, was proving to the PMO and to executives that we could chunk and work down a lot smaller, be more targeted about what we develop, deliver it very, very quickly and get immediate business results, measurable business results back, that you lose when you sort of projectize everything and deliver it as a large release with lots of changes. One of the problems when you deliver a larger release with lots of changes and you don't have that very discrete thing that you're changing and measuring, it's hard to know what had impact and what didn't have impact. And then there's the time delay in trying to do too much at once. I think impact mapping in this large organization was able to show that a huge organization could decide upon, develop, and deploy a very targeted and business impactful feature in a very short amount of time. And so now we're starting to see more the thinking around this whole business side agility growing at this large organization that we've been working with over the years. I think people are starting to understand the power of it, and we're seeing it grow there. So I think that's my probably my favorite thus far.
I think my favorite's a little bit different. It's different scale. So I mentioned I work in DC. So my clients are government agencies. And we have my client who's a government agency PMO who was struggling to be seen as relevant within their organizational structure. They're the ones who come in after the fact and figure out who's to be blamed. They were not seen as the valuable partners within their development branch. So we used impact mapping to talk about what were their goals, what were the goals for the delivery branch, how do we map them, how does the PMO prioritize their actions that one, meet their goals, but also reflect high value of the delivery branch. The PMO could do 20 different things. Can we identify which of our 20 things have the highest value and hopefully a low level of effort for our delivery partners? By doing those first, they were able to get the buy-in. Oh, you guys aren't so bad after all. You're actually doing something that makes sense for us. Okay, we can do this. You're not suddenly giving us all this paperwork to fill out. By prioritizing activities like impact mapping, we had some projects, Agile or not, that used impact mapping to deliver their business case, and then we mapped the outcomes to their PM process. That really transformed how the people with the organization saw the PMO. They were suddenly seen as thought leaders. They were contributing actual value, and people came to them more often and actively sought out PMO leadership and expertise. So that to me was the biggest success story of using impact mapping to deliver value to my customer, who's a PMO, to make them more valuable to their customers.
All right, thank you, Leila. So we have a couple of questions that we will get to in just a second here. But first, I wanted to just say thank you guys very much for attending the webinar. We hope that you guys enjoyed the presentation, that we answered your questions. Please let us know if you still have questions. We'd be happy to talk with you afterwards. Our next live webinar is just a couple of weeks from now, March 2nd, coming up again with Roland and another business agility topic. I think you can probably see the theme here. We'll be doing 5 agile metrics that drive business agility. So details and a registration link are coming to you after we close here. And while we're talking about business agility, Lightspeed will be offering an IC Agile accredited course in business agility foundations at this year's Business Agility Conference in New York City. Lots of business agility going on. This certification is kind of the gatekeeper for learning journeys. IC Agile has a newly expanded business agility track, and that includes Agile leadership, marketing, talent, and a couple of others. And speaking of Agile leadership, we are planning for our third session of the Agile Leadership Academy on March 12th and 13th. This session focuses on lean product management and design and includes a site visit to a company that's currently practicing Agile methods at a full scale, as well as a full-day workshop and other networking opportunities with industry executives. More details on registration for that is coming to you after we close as well. In events land, we are preparing for Lean Agile 2018. That's Lightspeed's own niche conference. It's a one-day affair. We've got 2 tracks of really amazing content centered around the theme of Agile engineering and DevOps. The call for speakers is still open. If you are interested in submitting a topic to us, the submission portal link will be coming to you guys after we close. And you can check out this past year's highlights at leanagiledc.com and give us a shout at Ellis Events at lightspeed.com if you're interested in speaking or sponsoring. If you're interested in diving a little bit deeper on any of the topics that we cover today, links to the recording and our contact information is coming to you when we close. As always, we will continue to take some additional questions for a few minutes. Definitely want to respect your time. But if you'd like to ask us anything else, we'll be available. Also, be sure to check out our website and information on Facebook and Twitter. We'll have live updates on upcoming webinars, events, and of course our training schedule. So again, thank you guys very much for joining us. We'll see you next time, and we'll get back into some questions here. So Leila and Roland, what could be a sign of impact mapping done badly? I can appreciate this is tricky as the decision to proceed versus the success of the outcome, and an Agile world should be rooted in the constant inspection and adaptation.
Sure, I've certainly had some less than ideal impact mapping stories. The fastest way for it not to be successful is not having the right people in the room. So if you're doing impact mapping for a problem that you don't own, meaning the people in the room, if you don't own the problem, it's not going to be very successful because you're not going to get the kind of buy-in you need to do this. The other one is trying to do more than one goal at a time. I've had clients say, oh, we're all here. It's so hard to get the people together at one time. Can we just do multiple goals? And that's never worked out well. So I would say and the third thing that I know is not a good use of impact mapping is, even if we do all this effort and do it really well, and it doesn't get updated, this is not a pretty artwork you hang in a manager's office. This is something that every sprint, every release, we have to go back and look at it. Is this still valid? Are our assumptions still valid? If you're doing impact mapping once a year and rest of the time it's hanging in your manager's office or filed somewhere, that's not a very successful impact map in my experience. Anything else, Roland?
Yeah, I think piggybacking on the last thing you were saying, I guess a less than ideal outcome for me would be that you go through and do all this impact mapping stuff. You go through and you get the big fan out, and over on the right-hand side, you've got 50 different outcomes that could be achieved, and you get with your product management and explain them all, and they say, "Great, yes, I want all of that. Go do all of that," right? And now we're back to the long delivery cycles, long projects, huge budgets, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that there has to be some mechanism by which you hone in on all of those potential actions over on the right-hand side of the impact map and say, here are the 1 or 2 or 3 that we're going to pursue right now, immediately, launch those, measure the impact, and then pick the next round based upon what you learned.
The one additional that just came to me is you have to have a facilitator to do impact mapping. Somebody who knows the technique and knows the process, but does not have a say in the content. So impact mapping, trying to manage the conversations that happen and keep it time boxed and flowing, not doing a facilitator would definitely be a less than ideal impact map process as well as less than ideal outcome. And every session that Roland and I talked about, I think we were the facilitators or someone like us.
A very important fact there, Leila. Thank you. All right, next question here. Does this help to get senior stakeholders to agree on priorities across organizations?
Yes, that is going to be one of the biggest outcomes from impact mapping done well. So often, senior stakeholders are bombarded with information coming from different directions, often contradictory. What impact mapping enables them to do is look at the whole picture. They are looking at a business goal and they're able to prioritize among all the different alternatives what in their experience and their expertise would be most likely to achieve that goal. Again, we're doing a bit of guesswork when we're doing impact mapping, which is fine. Let's make educated guess and then let's validate our guess so that next time we make a decision, we're learning from that.
Yep. And I would say the way I might use impact mapping with those senior leaders is there's always a far greater appetite for change in work than there is time and budget to do it. You ask all the stakeholders in the organization what they want, you'll get an endless list of things that need to be done, and we don't have the time or the money to do everything. So the impact mapping helps you then to map all this back to what are the outcomes that we agree that we need to achieve. You know, what are the priorities of those outcomes? What are the outcomes we want to fund and try to achieve now? What are the outcomes that we're going to put on the table and wait till later to do? And given the outcomes that we think are most important, then what are the smaller set of things that we would actually implement now in order to achieve those business outcomes? So it's a way of honing down the endless wish list and to be something much more concrete and measurable and hopefully achievable in a shorter amount of time and also with less money.
All right, a well thought out answer from you both. Our next question here is, how many people would you suggest would be the right amount to go through this together? My entire team or just a select portion?
Okay, so this is a hard question because the answer quite simply is it depends on the scope of the problem. The bigger the scope of your problem is, the more people, or at least the people who are in the room, should have a higher scope of knowledge and influence. I've usually done this within organizations. So generally, I've never had less than 6, and I try not to have more than a dozen because at that point, we're outstripping my ability to track conversations and to keep people focused. So I would generally say 6 to 8 has been my experience of a good number, but Roland's working at a bigger scale. So,
well, no, it very much depends. One way to think about it might be to look at, that last slide where we were showing the weighted shortest job first in terms of choosing which impacts we want to focus on and what actions we want to focus on. If you look at that equation, it asks for the job size. Do I have anyone in the room who can give rough estimates and say this work is bigger than that work? It asks for user business value. Do I have people in the room who'd be able to have enough contact with users or customers as clients to say this is more important to them than that? And so that might be another way of approaching it so that you can make, have the right information in the room to be able to make these decisions.
All right, thank you guys. Our next question here kind of ties back to another one that we've already answered. How could you determine which of these levels turn into epics, features, and user stories?
I hate to point out the obvious, but it comes down to your experience, knowing your systems. And again, be realistic. Look at one of the deliverables, and based on your previous experience of other epics, is it bigger or smaller? A quick relative estimation. If that doesn't provide answers, take one deliverable, take it to your team, and deconstruct it. Have them estimate how much, what are the basic components that need to be done, how much are those things going to take, come up with some numbers. There, usually, every deliverable in impact maps I've done turns into about 4 to 8 to 12 weeks of work. So 4 to 12 weeks of work has been my rule of thumb, but there's no right answer here as far as I know.
Yeah. I'll add some more to that too. And for instance, the example I gave in the deck of the Apple Pay, When we finally got down to the far right-hand side of the impact map and said, okay, we're going to do Apple Pay or Apple Wallet, that in itself was still, too big to do in one sprint. That was probably an epic level piece of work that had a number of user stories under it in terms of, for instance, implementing Apple Pay. So I think you'll need to look at what level of granularity you get to in terms of your actions. And then hopefully those actions are sort of, MVP. I like to think of those as MVP level kinds of actions over there. It's a targeted piece of capability or functionality that provides some immediate value to customers, probably still bigger than a user story. We probably then would take those MVPs, give them to the team. This is how we're sort of giving direction to the team in terms of what's the highest priority thing to do next. They would then take that MVP and probably have to break it down into smaller user stories that could get done within sprint time frame. That's how I would. That's how I've seen it play out.
The one thing that's kind of worked for me is impact mapping gives you the what and the why. The team then tells you the how. So maybe the first time you do it, you don't know how big an impact is until you go back to your team and do the deconstruction estimation and come back to it. Maybe you do have to break it down. But generally speaking, think about the impact mapping as giving the what and the why for the business perspective, and the team figures out how to enable it.
Just maybe the last statement on this is you could all just turn this around, maybe from instead of thinking about how to categorize it in terms of features or user stories, just turn it around and think about timeframes instead. Am I trying to achieve an impact in a week? If my target time frame is a week, then what I come out of this process with has to be very small and very tight. If I'm trying to produce an impact in a month, that would lead me to a different level of granularity I need to get to. And if I'm trying to get to an impact within a quarter, maybe that's another level of granularity. So I would probably think more in terms of timeframes than what to call it.
All right. Well, thank you guys. I believe that was the last question that we had here. If you all have any other questions, please feel free to contact us separately. You can submit those to operations@lightspeed.com, and we'd be happy to respond back to those. I just want to thank our presenters one more time, Roland and Leila, for giving us their time as well. And with that, we look forward to having you guys with us again. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Stephanie.